Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So with a raise of hands, I was wondering how many of you could raise your hands and tell me if you've been an employee or a customer at a store or retailer where you've had to make a return or pick up something and if you were angry, if you're the customer maybe, or if you had to deal with the angry customer. Upset. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. How many of you had to interact with a family member or friend who's maybe gotten a little agitated or a little mad at you? All right. Last one is how many of you had to work with a coworker who maybe lost their cool because they were frustrated or got upset? Okay. So like many of you, I've experienced all of these situations. And the latest situation was actually this past weekend when I went to Legoland. So I took a family trip this past weekend. My husband and my son and I went to Legoland down in Southern California. And I would say arguably it's probably the happiest place for little 5 to 8 years old kids because it's definitely for a certain age group. The weather was really nice. They had a Lego Star Wars day. It was really exciting. But the park, of course, it was a Saturday. It was crowded. There were a lot of people, long lines, long food lines. And as the day progressed, I noticed that a lot of the parents and children understandably got tired, a little more irritated. Rides started to break down, and so I noticed that the employees who are called, the park employees who are called model citizens because they're models like Lego models, but they also are model citizens in a lot of ways with helping and dealing with people who are visiting the park. So during the visit, I noticed that a lot of the employees were very well behaved. They had many interactions with upset parents because maybe rides were broken or lines were too long. And I had to say that I was pretty impressed because they really kept their cool. They were patient and they listened to the parents' complaints or what they were concerned about. They controlled their emotions really well, especially when some parents were kind of in their face or angry and raising their voice. And in one situation in particular, I heard one of the model citizens talking to another saying that, this has been a long day, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go home, go for a run and de-stress and, get re-energized for the next day, which I thought was really positive. So in watching these model citizens, it kind of made me think about my own behavior and interactions with people, and I thought today I'd like to share some tips and tricks with you on dealing with people who maybe aren't such model citizens. So, a couple points. The first one is, I noticed that the employees were great at listening. So, a lot of times when people are upset, they're very emotional. But really, I think a lot of times we just want to be heard and understood, and maybe we just need to vent out things. So a tip that I kind of like to think about is that when I'm talking with somebody who's maybe a little upset, is to ask questions, to figure out what's wrong, to understand their point of view a little more. Another thing is that I've noticed active listening is actually very difficult to do. A lot of times I think we think we're doing it, but we aren't really because we're thinking about what kind of feedback or how to respond to the person. So a little trick that I use sometimes is to really be active, is sometimes to lean in, maybe lean my head in because it forces me to listen a little better and focus. And I also like to nod my head as I'm listening to them because it helps me understand better and comprehend what they're saying. Another tip, control your emotions and actions. So, a lot of times, again, people are upset, they're very emotional. The number one thing for me to do is to try to put my emotions in check because it doesn't help if I'm responding to their emotions and I'm getting upset and, voices are getting raised and people are getting just more agitated. So one thing that I like to do is try to calm down, take big, deep breaths, slow down to calm myself down, but also just take a pause sometimes before I'm responding to somebody. Another thing that I try to do is to speak in a calm voice, try to relax myself too, because if I'm talking and I'm really agitated, I'm going to be upset and I'm going to inadvertently raise my voice and not add to the understanding of the conversation. And lastly, I don't like to try to argue with them on their point that they're trying to make. I like to try to listen to what they're saying and understand. And even if I don't agree with them, I want to let them be able to talk and vent and get what they're trying to get across to me. Another thing with controlling your emotions and actions is to watch your body language. So a lot of times we inadvertently make facial expressions that might cue, like maybe be a little aggressive, or it might even kind of irritate them because they think that we're not listening. Also, other actions that we do with our hands, like pointing or touching them, that's usually not a good thing to do when people are upset, because they can take it as aggression or something that they want to have their space. So giving them their space. Lastly, an important point, I think, is to de-stress. So, as somebody who is taking maybe the brunt and taking your emotions and making sure that keeping those in check, you want to make sure that your emotional and mental needs are met. So a lot of times it's helpful for me to release those, and I think for other people too. So a couple of things that I like to do is to find a trusted friend, to vent to them, to maybe just say, hey, I had a really hard day, this happened, this interaction, and it was difficult, and I always feel better. I usually always feel better when I do that. Another thing that I like to do, and some of my friends, we like to exercise, like maybe we'll go run, or we'll go hit some balls at the golf range. My best friend likes to meditate, so that's another thing, doing yoga, something like that that's healthy for us and relaxing. Could be painting, gardening, something like that, but finding something that's good for you to do and release some of that stress that you've been taking on. So, in conclusion, dealing with difficult people and diffusing situations can be very tiring, draining. One thing to remember is that you can't always change people's opinions. You can only change how you behave and how you interact with people. And so, whether you're visiting a busy amusement park like I did this past weekend, if you're dealing with returning something at a big box home improvement store, or you're having a discussion with your beloved mother-in-law at Thanksgiving and they're telling you that you're too chubby or something, or you're trying to explain why your project is delayed to your boss, try to remember, it's helpful to remember to listen, to control your emotions and actions, and to de-stress. So hopefully these tools will be helpful for your everyday personal and work life. And I think that they'll help because we can all learn to be better model citizens.
Very good.